I know, like, for notes, there are people that's what they do for a living. They give notes, for people at home, they give notes for the studio people, give notes, the network people give notes.
They're required to.
They're required
That's why
to.
a lot of them don't make sense.
That's their job. And when you think about it, what's a note? It's always going to be negative. Like, if you just go, I liked everything,
right.
Then you're an idiot, apparently, even though why wouldn't that be the case sometimes? So when Seinfeld came around, Seinfeld came under the aegis of Rick Ludwin and Late Night because they had him signed to a holding deal in case he replaced Johnny Carson. So Seinfeld's sort of a guy that thinks he should earn his money, and has that Protestant work ethic, and he's like, well, I'm being paid $1 million, I'll make a show, And everybody, in the world, I remember, had always thought, what about a show about being a comic? What I mean? That was what everybody wanted to do. And then when you thought about it, you're like, no, that's not a good idea at all. So he did that with Larry David as a summer show in the summer, called the Seinfeld Chronicles. And it didn't do well. And then it became a hit, and then Larry David, and both of them, but especially Larry David, is very hard-headed and was willing to walk, Jerry Seinfeld was willing to walk because he was making so much money as a stand-up comedian.
Right.
He was probably the biggest comedian at the time. So they wouldn't take notes, especially when the show became a hit. So, I'd hear stories from the writers about how, after the dress or whatever, they'd be in Larry's office, and Larry would be putting, a little putting thing, and Jerry would be sitting on the couch, and then the guy would give a note, like, I was thinking if Elaine, didn't act so surprised at that moment in the third act, and then Larry would go, I don't know. I kind of liked it. What about you, Jerry? You go, I liked it. And the guy go, oh. And then I had a show at the same time. And I was like, I would pitch them on, and I go, well, they do that on the Larry's show. On Seinfeld. And they go, well, that's Seinfeld. Like, some different thing, And I thought, well, now after Seinfeld was such a success, well, now they'll go to that paradigm.
Right.
A great comedian, and then a guy he chooses, and then two guys write the show. Which was also the interesting thing about Seinfeld, is they had a room full of writers, none of which wrote the show. The idea was you would go to Jerry or Larry and tell them a story from your life. That was
right, but it had to be a real story.
Real story.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a brilliant idea. And then they would write it, And I remember Spike Fairstein telling me that he wrote the Soup Nazi episode. And the entire story he told them was that there was a guy in New York that was a soup Nazi, and, that was it. That he was a real mean guy. And so he told me, like, years later, he goes, does it ever bother you, like, I won an Emmy for that Soup Nazi episode, even though you wrote the entire thing? And he said, Larry said, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He hadn't forgot it.
I know it's time to close my eyes to old ends, open up to new friends, leave my heart in Berlin, where the tables turning, seeking.
Do you ever look at the fluke that there's... Or do you think that doesn't exist as much? Do you think it's hard work more?
If you really want to be funny and you don't really care what the consequences are, but you want to do this thing that you think is funny, and you have a good sense of that, that's what makes or breaks it. It's like Larry and I together had a very solid idea of what we would not do. But to answer your question, was it a fluke? Yeah, there's always luck.
Yes.
But when you don't care if the people are attractive, if you and I sit in a room and they say, we're going to send in 5 people to play this part, How hard is it for you and I to go, well, that's the funny guy right there?
Right.
How hard is that?
That's very simple.
It's very simple. But because we're comics.